very good morning to you here on WESN, the content capital. This is Tuesday, November 23rd. It was coming down the pike on this edition of AM Prime. I'm Andy Johnson. We hope you stay with us, and thanks for being with us thus far. Well, some of what is on the program, of course, we give you the usual diet. We'll tell you what these figures are with COVID-19 as we speak today. We have your watch this. We would look at something called what happens when antibiotics are not taken according to prescription or are used irrationally. Our lineup of guests include Dr. Lakram Bolo. There was a story in the paper a couple of days ago about a father who was under 60. He had no comorbidities. He was fully vaccinated, yet he got the COVID-19 virus and died. What are they saying in the medical community about stuff like that? We will talk with him about that. Also, Ignacio Smith, an advisor and coach on private financing advice, and he's talking with us about an initiative called Climate Invest System. And then Jules Sobian joins us this morning to continue our discussion about whether or not there should be a Carnival 2022. And we will tell you about what you heard in the news a while ago, Randy Glasgow advising the government against any such move in 2022 at all. But first, with us this morning, Mr. Martin George. He's chairman of the Tobago Business Chamber. He's an attorney of long standing. He's been a member of the Commission for the Reform of Law in Trinidad and Tobago, the Law Reform Commission. Among other hats he's worn over time. We're speaking with him this morning about the situation in Tobago. He's been vocal about the role and function of the private sector in Tobago, its relationship with the government. There was one story in which he said that he thought that the government was mama-guying on the question of opening up the business sector and the private sector in Tobago. Mr. George, good morning.
Yeah, hi, good morning to you, Andy, and good morning to your viewers.
All right, good to have you. So let's dig into that a little bit. You're saying that the government is not really serious about creating the enabling environment for the private sector in Tobago to flourish, and to what extent that is an issue in this election campaign?
Well, actually, it's not an issue at all, Andy. That's the sad reality. It's not an issue at all because I think they have actually gotten most Tobagonians to the point where they are quite happy and comfortable remaining dependent largely on the THA as basically the fatted calf from which they all nurse and suckle, and once they get the milk and honey flowing, they are quite contented. So unfortunately, it's not an issue at all in the election, and it's hardly likely to be for the foreseeable future. The tragedy, though, is that you end up with a mass state dependency syndrome whereby basically whoever controls the THA controls the lives, the fortunes, and the destinies of more than 60% of the working population in Tobago. And that is not something that is really sustainable in any real economy or in any real world scenario, because you cannot have a situation where the state is the main supporter or supplier of employment, particularly when you look at it in the context of the fact that Tobago basically is not a self-sustaining economy. Tobago is one where every year they have to come down to central government with a begging bowl, begging for $3 billion or $4 billion or $5 billion in order for them to run their affairs. And then the majority of that goes back to recurrent expenditure. If you look at the last budget that was read out, 88.1% of the allocations from central government are earmarked for recurrent expenditures. That is wholly inappropriate or unsustainable. So it's not a scenario that can continue forever. But as I say, they have managed to get most Tobagonians to the point where they seem quite happy and comfortable with it. So as I said, it's not an election issue at all.
And so the I suppose the spectacular $50 million gift, as people are referring to it, that was announced by the Chief Secretary a couple of days ago. So that is sort of piling on that kind of position on the people rather than pulling back.
Well, even that, Andy, one has to, you really have to wonder about that, because there has never been any full or proper accounting or, full transparency in terms of the last 50 million tranche that the government gave. So this here coming just before an election, one has to question as to where it's going to really end up. And you have to ask the question. And I mean, I know it may be something that may offend some, but at the end of the day, the realistic question you have to ask is whether it is really just an election slush fund. If you understand me, a very convenient way to funnel money for the purposes of your electioneering or, any such thing. So the idea of it coming at this time raises the question, but of course, if it is applied the way that it is touted to and the way it is supposed to, then of course, yes, it can be a good thing to bring assistance and relief to persons who need that help. However, the monitoring and the evaluation of it thereafter, and of course, the transparency and accountability, I think, are the most important factors as to whether this is really going to be effective in meeting and treating with the needs of the people of Tobago, or whether it really is, as some have, described it, in terms of the election that is due.
Yeah, so it's a promise to pay. So that is not going to be realized before December 6th. So that is a promise.
That's the point.
If
That's
we win,
the point. So
we'll do this.
it really appears to be a sweetener that is added, but the point is you're not getting to taste the coffee yet. So you don't have a clue as to whether you really are going to benefit from it.
There was a headline in one of the newspapers in The Guardian on November 8th. And the headline says, Tobagonians worry about the economy and are ready for change. But I read through the story and I'm not seeing too much of the narrative where people saying they want change. But maybe those sentiments were not carried in the piece. But what is there? Is there that sense that there's this mood for change?
Well, the thing is, what I'm not sure about is how much there is any worry, because I have said quite repeatedly that I think part of the the tragicomedy that represents the Tobago space or the Tobago place or the Tobago economy is that you by and large have a scenario where the majority of participants are contented. They are, by and large, contented with the way things are, the way things run, So the fact of the matter is that if they desire change, it may simply be on the basis that, well, listen, these people are there too long, let's try somebody else, if you understand me. But there isn't that sense of anxiety that I can, sense or detect to say that people are deeply discontented in any way, form, or fashion. But as I say, they may say, well, look, yes, all right, we've had enough of, A, so let's try B. So in that sense, you may find, some desire for change. But, by and large, the Tobago population is one that, as I say, is contented.
Yeah, and there seems to be, as the days come closer, there seems to be the tempo is rising, and sort of the fight is getting nastier. One of the papers this morning, there's a full page ad, sort of taken out from different matters over a couple of years concerning Watson Duke, and there's a full page ad in the paper accusing him of this, that, or the other, pointing out that he's before the court for this, that, and the other.
Right, yeah. Well, the thing is, it appears that the strategy employed by the PNM, and of course you see the charge being led by the Prime Minister, is to demonize Mr. Duke and also to paint him as the true head of the PDP, who is basically putting up a front man in the form of Mr. Augustine, so that the PDP could eventually assume office and that Mr. Duke could eventually take over. I think that is fairly clear from the narrative that you've seen from the PNM. That basically is what they are saying, and that's where they are heading. Their campaign is hinged on that. So basically, they're telling Tobagonians, listen, be careful, be wary of this character because of his past, his history, his antecedents. So I would imagine the newspaper article, the newspaper ad is part of that narrative. So yes, you see it heating up in that way. But the fact of the matter is that in the last election, they won 6 seats. So if it is that there is still that momentum for change, then one wonders, what is likely to happen come December 6th. Because if that tide for change is still running with the PDP, then you may see that being realized.
And what's your sense of that, the likelihood of that the movement for change, so to speak, is still very much in the air?
Speaking to people on the ground, you get a sense of frustration with the fact that, look, you've had one party there for more than 20 years.
21 years.
Me? Yes. So therefore, in that circumstance, I think you have a lot of people, particularly among the young people, they are all for change. I could tell you that's the feeling you get on the ground. So it's a question of, I guess, how you mobilize your troops on election day, how you get your forces out and, get them to the polls, that kind of thing. The election day machinery, which of course, the PNM is always good with their election day machinery. So I guess it's up to the PDP to see if they can step up to the plate in terms of, matching that type of efficiency and mobilization on election day, so that it's not just talk and therefore they actually get their supporters to the polls. But really and truly on the ground, there is a sense of frustration with the fact that you've had one administration there for 21 years. And, in that sense, the tide for change favors the PDP in that regard.
Yeah, and then there was another story that I was just looking at among young. There's a divide among certain groups of young people. The story said that an executive member of the Tobago Youth Council has a different view from a young person who is a member of the Tobago Literary Guild or the Tobago Writers Guild. So that even among that cohort, on whom the future rests, there seems to be differences of opinion and therefore probably differences of preference.
Right, but the thing is, you have to wonder if one of those organizations is not really just a cover or a front for one of the political parties.
And which one is that? The guild or the youth council?
I think it might be the TYC.
Yes. All right. And last question. On the question, you made a very vital point. In all elections, that is, it comes down to that. The election day machinery, and the PNM is very good at that. They know, in many cases, where every single vote is, where every single voter is, and they know how to get them out. And sometimes that makes the difference at the end of at the polls. What is your sense that the other parties know that and therefore are prepared to meet that challenge head on?
Well, I would think that, after the last election and even the previous THA election that they fought, I would think that they would have learned certain lessons, and I would imagine that by now they would have gotten on board persons with sufficient, knowledge and savvy in terms of election day mobilization to ensure that they have their machinery up to standard and running smoothly. It would only be reckless of them if they were not getting themselves into that position of readiness. So I can only assume that they will be ready, and I think we may be in for some interesting results. I think one way or the other, it might possibly be 8-7. In terms of who wins, I think it may be close, if you understand me.
Yes.
But the point is, as I say, the momentum for change is with the PDP. As to whether that translates into votes is a different question.
All right. Thank you very much, Sir Martin George, Chairman of the Tobago.
Always a pleasure, Andy, and good morning to you.
Thank you very much. We'll take a break, and when we come back, we give you the numbers this morning. What is being said regarding COVID-19 in our midst on this day? Stay with us. This is AM Prime.